going to begin. I'm going to ask that you always look at me when you're answering the questions, unless you feel guilty and you don't want to look me in the eyes. Okay? The first question, and it's always the standard question, I need your full birth name, okay, and then your married name, and your date of birth.
Mary, Daria, I just found that out. All these years. You want my single name?
Mm-hmm.
Talotta, T-A-L-O-T-T-A, of course now D'Angelo. And I was born in Cementon, Pennsylvania, which is a very, very small town outside of Allentown, on October 25th, 1923.
Okay. So now let's start from the beginning. You're born in Pennsylvania. Are your parents Italian immigrants?
Yes, they're both Italian immigrants.
Okay. Can you tell me their names and a little bit about their story, just to give us some background?
Well, it's gonna take forever. My mother's Julia, and her single name was Fornachari. She has an interesting story. When she was a baby, her mother and father came over to the United States, and they left her there. She was the firstborn, just to be with her grandmother. And so they came over here without her. And but in the meantime, when they came over here, as was the case during that period, her mother had a boarding house, so that, people that came over, the immigrants as they came over, stayed in her house. And a lot of them, as you know, they came over to make some money, and then they would send for their spouses or families or whatever. So my father came in and stayed in the boarding house. And my grandmother really liked him. Then when my mother was 13 years old, they sent for her. But in the meantime, they had 3 other children born in that Cement, very small town. So she came over at the age of 13, and she told me that she was pretty mature and grown by that time, and she was beautiful. And so her father used to take her around and, with him, and he was so proud of her. And I never saw that grandfather, because he was foreman, if I'm going too far, he was foreman in a cement crushing company. In fact, the town where we lived in Cementon, the reason it was called that is because they had a quarry there. And they got the chunks of cement and brought them to the next town, Northampton, to crush it to make cement. So at one point, he had instructed one of the employees to go, and it got stuck. There was a what do you call it when everything kind of got stopped going down? I can't think of the right term. And he's instructed him to go down and try to disengage it, and he wouldn't do it. So he did it, and that's where he died. He went down in that quarry, in that crusher. So I never knew him. But in the meantime, my mother was 13 when she came there. My father was probably in his mid-20s, so they fell in love. After he fell in love with my mother, my grandmother didn't like him anymore. So she did not approve of this situation. However, they did get married. My mother was 15 and he was 25. And then she disowned my mother. So it's kind of a crazy situation, because we lived in the same town. She lived down the street. I didn't even know I had another grandmother because of this estrangement. So that's the story of my mother and father to that point. Now, my father was a shoemaker. And this was all, of course, during the Depression. There were 7 of us in the family, 7 children.
Where are you in the order?
Oh, I am number, let's see, what was he? I'm number 5. And then there were 2 later, 2 sisters later.
The ones older than you, are they boys or girls?
My oldest is a sister, Rosie, and then there's Ralph next, and then Alfred is after that, and then John after that, and then I was number 5.
So your mother was a stay-at-home mother?
Well, in those days she worked, there was a silk factory in the same town where we lived in, and she worked there. And later on, she also worked in a dress factory in Allentown. So most of the time during the Depression, a lot of the women did work, and she did because there were 7 mouths to feed. Pretty tough.
Before I go too far, I want to know more about this, and I'm going to flesh it out some.
Sure.
What just to give me a heads up, when do you come to Erie?
That was after I married George, and we both not attended. We both were in med school together. I mean, we married right before that, and 2 of our children were born in the University of Rochester. 2 of our children were born there, and 3 were born at Duke, where he had his internship and residencies.
Okay, so tell me when you get married, and give me some time frame so that I can kind of gauge where we are in terms of time.
Okay.
When do you get married, and when do you come to Erie?
Oh, when we came to Erie, it was after all of his training at Duke, because we were there for 7.5 years, and we came here in 1958.
Okay, so I'm gonna kind of divide our story
That's right.
from in pre-1958 and post-1958. That way
Okay.
we get a little of the Erie story, but we
Sure.
can also focus mostly on your experience as a woman. And your mother is working in some factories, but she's also taking care of the home.
Oh, yeah.
Tell me about the home life. Tell me about what life was like. 7 children, 2 parents. Do you have any extended family living with you? Uncles and grandparents?
Oh, my grandparents lived right next door, and there were 2 uncles there. And I had cousins that lived there. What was the question?
What was life like in the house? Who
Oh.
managed the affairs of the home?
Well, both my father and my mother. My father used to do hams, he would get the... Well, actually, what used to happen is, I had another uncle who lived in the town, and he had a big family. And so in the fall, they would get together and get some hogs and have them slaughtered, and then they would make the hams out of it. This is a funny story. You don't have to laugh. They used to take the blood from this animal, and they made what is called sanguinach, which means blood pudding. And they would cook it down with some nuts and brown sugar, and I think raisins, and they'd cook it down to like a pudding. And then they would can it, and we used to have that for, dessert. So of course we loved it. But then when I was old enough to find out what it was made of, I wouldn't eat it anymore.
So, you're in Cementon.
Yes,
You're born in 23.
right?
You start school there.
Yes.
Right? Are you living in an Italian community? Is it an Italian neighborhood, or is it a mixed ethnic?
No, it was mostly Pennsylvania Dutch. And they did not like us. And, the other thing that was kind of painful was that churches, the Catholic churches, didn't want us. We were kind of pushed around because we were poor. There were see, 1, 2, 3. There probably was only 5 Italian families in this town, and they were all right, right next door to us.
And
And
related
all
to you.
all friends, not related, but all friends. We used to help each other can tomatoes, We'd go to one house and do it, clean all the tomatoes and they'd get it ready to can, and then we'd go to another house and help them. So it was a very close-knit situation, but only a very few families.
Let me ask a question, and it's a question I ask every time, but because of your circumstances, we may hear something different.
Okay?
When did you realize you were Italian? When did you first know that you were Italian American?
I don't know. I guess I always knew, because I had Italian grandparents right next to us and Italian friends right next to us. Across the street were the Groovers. They didn't want their children to have anything to do with us.
So are you saying that because you were different and because you were a small population in this non-Italian...
And we were Catholic, of course.
Okay. Because the people who grew up in Little Italy, it really wasn't until they went to school and realized not everyone's like us.
Mm-hmm.
How did your family express their Italian heritage in the home?
Well, food, celebrations at Easter and Christmas and that sort of stuff.
Or anything that those are celebrations that are shared across cultures in many ways. Are there ways in which your celebrations and your holidays were uniquely Italian, though? We've heard about St. Joseph's Day, which it seems very prominent within the Italian American community. Were there other things that you did that were uniquely Italian?
I have to say that I don't think our family was very religious, because they only went to church for weddings and funerals. But they did see that we had our communion and confirmation and that we went to church. But they very seldom went to church. They were good people. And as a matter of fact, this is very interesting because of the fact that a lot of the churches didn't want us, and for some reason or other, there were some people who were never baptized. No, not baptized, excuse me. They didn't have a Holy Communion or confirmation. So, and I'm not sure how this came about, but there was a town called Copley, about 4 miles away. Small, a little bigger than Cementon. And there was a church there, it was a Hungarian church, and the priest was Father Rufenach. And he used to come to Cementon to give catechism to some of these people who never had their communion. Yes. And I remember how much we thought about him, that one time they all chipped in and bought him a radio. He was an exceptional person.
You're growing up in this Italian American home in a non-Italian community. Very little Catholicism in terms of the formal church because of discrimination and because of other things. But were there things that were Italian in faith that you saw in your home? Was it Malocchio or the
Oh,
the evil
yes.
eye? Can you address some of those superstitions and things like that?
Yes. Now, my mother was one that would do that. I don't know what you would call them, but people would call her up and say "fa malocchia," So in other words, do the what do they call it? It's terrible to get old and forget the words.
Is it a potion or a
No,
ritual?
what would you call it? Is a
Like a prayer.
A prayer or a
yeah.
saying,
She would. It's a. Why can't I think of the word?
incantation.
Well, the way she did it, she would have a dish of water, I think it was. No, I think your mother did it that way. No, she would say prayers. And then she would her eyes would start to water. I mean, she couldn't control it. And then, whatever the prayers were, and I never knew, I don't know whether anybody knew, the person would call her back and say she's fine. It's like whatever she did took care of this malokia. You probably don't know what that is. It's sometimes when you give and I'm not sure what that is either.
Evil eye. Evil eye.
Evil eye.
It's when you give a compliment, if you're not sincere,
Mm-hmm.
something like that, that it's like you're wishing something bad instead of something good. And so they called it overlook in Famalokia. So my mother used to do it. Now, if you want me to interject this, George's mother did it differently. She had a bowl of water, and she would dip her finger. She said prayers too, I think. She would dip her finger in the oil, and if it just dropped and did nothing, then the person was no look. But if it did circles, if it made circles in the water, then that's meant that the person was hexed, if you want to call it hexed.
Are there other examples of that kind of stuff? Putting
Those are
things,
the only two I know.
putting
because
things on the house as kind of to ward off evil or anything like that?
Well, I think maybe farmers did that or some other, but I don't know in terms of Italian.
I want to step back because you said something earlier that you're in this Amish community, this Pennsylvania Dutch community.
Yeah,
And that they didn't like you.
right.
How do you know?
Well, because they didn't want their children playing with us. They didn't associate with us. You know, a neighbor is a neighbor. You would think they would sort of be neighborly. There were also some Slavish people that were in the city too. But I think most of them were Pennsylvania Dutch. And we, as kids, we went to the Czechoslovakian church to get our communion and confirmation. And we used to have to walk a long way for that. We'd have to go over a river, over a bridge, and then it was a long way. But my parents made sure we did that, and we did. They didn't like us either. But I learned to say the Hail Mary in Czechoslovakian.
Did you know it in Italian?
No,
But you knew it in
I did.
in Czech.
Czechoslovakia. I knew it for a long time. In fact, recently I said it to Eileen, who's she's Polish, so it was similar. And she says, "Oh, you got it, you got it." But I can't remember it now.
Did you experience any overt, almost violent discrimination?
No,
Now,
no, they call us names. You know,
Like what?
Dago or I forget. There's something else they used to call us. And they weren't very friendly.
You mentioned something at the very beginning, and I want to make sure I ask it just before I forget. You mentioned the Daria. You said your birth
My
name.
middle name was Daria.
Okay. Well, how is it that you suddenly?
Well, for a long time I went with Mary Ann, and I don't know why, because I don't think I was Mary Ann. But recently we came across my, not my birth certificate, what is the other one?
Your christening?
No.
The birth registration.
Well, not the baptism. Maybe it was the baptism. We came across a document, which I hope we still have. And my middle name was Daria. Daria. And I know people with the name of Daria here in town. She's Italian. So, I mean, all of a sudden I have a middle name Daria. So that's what I go by now.
All right. So you're growing up in this relatively poor working class home. What do you think the expectations of you were when you were a child? Did they expect you to become just a housewife, to work in the factories, What was your family's expectation?
They thought I was gonna become an opera singer. There were, in our family, there were 3 sisters and 2 brothers who sang. Just around, you know, and I used to sing for like Shriners or some of these organizations, can't think of right now. And as a matter of fact, my father was a big opera buff. And there was a doctor in Northampton, which was like the big city to us. He had his own clinic, and he was a big opera buff. So he had my father teach him Italian so that he could understand the opera, the dialogue. And how I started with voice, I used to sing all the time. I mean, my father used to say once in a while, oh, you know, in Italian, rest a little bit. So there was, in those days, the insurance people would come by and you would pay whatever your insurance was. So this man used to hear me singing all the time. So he said to my mother, you know, your daughter has a beautiful voice. She should have some training. So he had a client in Allentown, which was the big city. Her name was Nina Scheit. She studied with, you wouldn't know because you're too young, very famous opera singer called Schumannheit. And, but she studied with her. So he talked to her about me, and he said, you know, she really, you think maybe you could take her on? So she did, without no money. I had an audition with her, and until I was graduated from high school and started to earn money, I didn't have to pay her. So, now how did this come? Well, that's how it came about, as far as my voice was concerned. And my father, who was somewhat of an entrepreneur, so he thought, he made an arrangement with a importing company. You know, like Arnone's, sort of, to have me on the radio. But the idea was I was to be, I hated this, a masked singer. I came with a cape and a mask to the recording studio. And people used to send in, when you said to ask for them,
Request?
requests. Isn't it terrible?
No, we all.
Anyway, so one time they sent a request for Facetta Nera. You guys know? Facetta Nera means black face. And it was during the Ethiopian War. And the song is Facetta Nera. It's singing against Ethiopia. And it would say, yo, you blackface, blah, 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 we're gonna get you. That was the gist of it. So I knew the song because we used to play it. So I started singing it. I get this signal, you know. So I said, what happened? Well, that was a fascist song, you couldn't sing it. And then the other time when I was singing God Bless America. Now, God Bless America has a verse to it. And this, which I think is more beautiful than the rest of the song. So if you hear it, you don't know what it's going to be until you sing the body of the song. I can't think of the term. So as soon as after I got the verse out, as soon as I sang God Bless America, get off. At that time, the only person who could sing it on the phone was sing it on the radio or any place, was Kate Smith. It was written for her. So that was another kind of interesting. But I used to hate to go. I had to go with a mask and a cape and all that. But nothing ever came of it. I never got paid anything.
Well, let's take a little deviation from this story,
Okay.
and I'm gonna ask you, because other people have done it so far, maybe a couple others. Would you be willing to sing us something?
Oh my God. I don't think I could.
Norma did. It's up to you. You don't have to. I'm just saying, I'm willing to bet you could belt something out. And with a young singer here in the room, she'd like to be inspired by you.
Really?
She's a big
Well, I'm
Sinatra.
trying to think of something that I could just belt out.
Do you know Facetta Nera?
Acciatanera, della Pessina, aspetta, aspetta. No, that's not very good. Let's see. Gee, I can't think of
Okay,
anything.
you don't. You can think
Yeah,
about
I
it.
mean, if
I'm
I-
sure you'll think of a dozen songs on the way on the way
You're
back.
right about that.
You'll
You're
be
right
singing
about
all the way back to
that.
Erie.
Yeah.
Sing a nice operatic melody.
All right, so let's go back. You're in high school. At this point, do you still think you're going to be? This is your what? You're at 1940, right? You're 17
Well, I was
years
in
old.
the 30s. I graduated in 1941.
Okay, and so even in high school, you thought you were going to go on to a career in the opera, or are you beginning
Well-
to see other possibilities? And I guess what I'm asking you is, in what ways were your roles and future as a woman? What ways were they shaped by your Italian American heritage, where you grew up? What were the opportunities and limits for you as a woman in 1940?
Well, there were limits. First of all, I could never go to college because we couldn't afford it. And if I had had a patron of some kind, you know, I think maybe I may have been successful. But I did a lot of singing. I did a lot for organizations. I got a little mementos and stuff. And I sang. Oh, I know what I want to continue the story about Dr. Huff, who my father was teaching him Italian. My teacher always had on the radio once a year. She presented her students. So when she presented me, I remember that I sang Chitty Bitty Bee. What else did I sing? I think one that Pavarotti sings, Musica Proibita, which means forbidden music. I sang those two, and I didn't think I did so good, you know. And so when I got home, I was kind of down, and my father said, "Well, you did very well." She said, "You did very well." So he put this record on. He said, "Someday you will be able to sing as good as she." I didn't know it was me singing. And Dr. Huff probably had the first recorder to record something over the radio. I had no idea. This was a big surprise. And you know, that record got lost and we have no idea what happened to it. And then the second time she presented me, he went off to war. So I really did bad. It was right after he left for the service.
All right. Well, let's since you've made the segue. When do you meet him? And tell me the circumstances. No comments. Don't even make eye contact. I don't want you like shushing up a story that you know you don't want to be revealed.
Well, my father was very active in the Sons of Italy. But we moved from our small town to Bethlehem. My father bought a small restaurant there, and we lived right across the street from it. And let's see, let me get this straight. Not too long after we moved there, my brother John was dating this girl, and she was active in the church in Fountain Hill, which was not too far away from us. And they had a Lenten dance every year. So that particular year, which was, it was February 14th, 1942. We moved to Bethlehem in 41, and right before, right after the Pearl Harbor situation. And so my brother, to make brownie points with this gal who was chairman of the ball, bought an extra ticket for me. So normally he wouldn't take his sister, but he did. So we were there. I didn't know anybody because I was new in town. But Betty, who was the gal that my brother was dating, she introduced George and I. He was waiting in line to call another girl on the phone, but I was introduced to him at that point. So I don't remember too much about that evening because I didn't know anybody, and I never did like dancing. Never did like dancing. But anyway, so the very next day, George was at Muhlenberg College, and I was working in a dress factory. So we got on the same bus to go to Allentown. And when I got on, he gave me his seat. Of course, we had just met the night before. So we talked, and he asked me for my telephone number. I gave it to him. And then that evening when I got home, or later on that day, he called me up and asked me for a date, but I turned him down because I was dating another fella that I graduated from high school with. Okay, that was the first time.
Now, stop for a second. You're at a dance, and he's waiting in line to call someone.
Yeah.
And then he later gets your phone number to call you.
Yes.
Did you think
The next day.
Yeah.
Yes.
Did you think this was a guy who was getting a lot of girls' phone numbers, or what? Did you
No,
think
I
he was
didn't- I
kind of
really-
a?
No, I didn't think anything of it. I thought he was a nice guy, and I had no qualms to give him my number, which I did. And like I say, he called me and I turned him down. So then, that was, of course, in February of 42. Then in May of 42, they had the Sons of Italy annual dinner. And I was the program. I sang. And I can't remember where we sang before dinner, after dinner, I don't remember. But, again, I didn't know anybody, but I was with my parents. And it was held in the Masonic Hall in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania. Now, the Masonic Hall is this big dance area, and all around it is a
balcony, balcony.
what do you call it? That you bend over.
A balcony?
A balcony, all around it. So I'm sitting there with my parents. I think I already sang, and we had our dinner and everything, and we're sitting there, so there was dancing. So I'm sitting there, and I'm bored to death, because I have a date with Francis that night. So I'm looking around, and there's George. And he's eyes meet. 2 seconds, he's down there and asked me to dance. So I got up and I danced with him. Then I went back to my parents. I said, let's go home. So as soon as I got in the door, the telephone rang, and it was George asking me for a date, and I turned him down again.
Did you think maybe at some point he should catch a clue?
Well,
Are you still thinking that?
No, it was mostly because I was sort of being true to Francis.
Okay.
You know, I was still seeing him. So
You wouldn't think
then
how
what
I was
happened?
going to.
Then what happened in the meantime, I was working in the dress factory, and I saw an ad in the paper for a jewelry store, for a clerk. And so I answered it, and I got the job. Now, the jewelry store, George's family lived,
Block and a half.
you wouldn't believe what they lived in. But they lived right around the corner from the main street where all the businesses were. And so Finkelstein's jewelry store was right there, 2 doors from the corner. And, so one day nothing was going on. I was kind of leaning like this on the counter watching the people go by. And you know, and all of a sudden, now Finkelstein's had a window and then a door, then a window. Now he's coming along and he's got a bag of chocolate covered nuts and he's popping them in his mouth. And I'm seeing him, I notice him, you know. And all of a sudden he comes across the door. Then he comes back, he sees me. So he comes in and he starts talking to me. By that time, I guess I was starting to melt. So he invited me to his sister's graduation. She graduated a year after he. They were only a year apart. So I accepted. And so that's how the romance started. So, but it was kind of not a very good experience because his sister didn't like me. And she didn't like me because of this other girl, Teresa Cacciatore,
Yeah, she's got the story, that's right.
whom she preferred her brother, you know, be involved in. So that was kind of a little hairy situation. But that's how it all started.
How long until, or when did you get married? Let's establish
Oh, we
that.
got married in 1947, right after the war, well, we wanted to get married right after the war, but his mother wouldn't have it. So,
Okay, well, you said it, so now we gotta talk about it.
yeah, sure. Well, you know, I think they all saw this really hot deal going on between two people. And it was, you know. And I think she was afraid that maybe he wouldn't go to medical school, which was, of course, a dream. But I would have never stood in his way. So she did not want us to get married as soon as he got back, which is what we'd hoped for. So we had to wait a year. Besides which, she wanted me to live in their house, which was almost an impossible situation because it was 3-story. I don't know where we would have slept.
I don't know either.
So we just waited, and then we got married in 47 instead of 46. And that was right before he started medical school. So we went right away to University of Rochester.
Okay, well, I wanna step back a little bit.
Sure.
A lot of the women that have been in that seat have talked about how Italian mothers dote upon their sons. Did you see that? And did you see that, was there a rivalry or kind of control issues over this, the star son, you know what I mean?
Well, I think she was a little fearful that he wouldn't go ahead and, become a doctor. There was no reason at all for that to happen because we got married and we went to medical school. I mean, that was all. But I think she had a fear that that wouldn't happen. So that was one thing. Secondly, he was her number one, first child. And he also, at one time, almost went into the priesthood.
That's right.
So there were these factors, I think, that, kind of colored the situation. His mother never liked me, for whatever reason, until we started sending the money. That's a fact. She was a wonderful person. We always got along. I mean, you just yes her and you're all right. And eat her food, and she really makes, she really loved that. But she was just a very, very good person. She always had big Sunday dinners. She had priests over, a whole bunch of priests over every Sunday. We always used to say that was her way of getting to heaven. And I'm sure that's where she is.
All right, I'm going to jump a little bit ahead here.
Sure.
And I want just a real quick, almost kind of timeline of what happens between 1947 and 58. Because I know you get married in 47, and then in 58 you come to Erie. So give me just a real quick rundown, and then I'll have another question about that, and then we'll move to what's happening in Erie and your
Okay.
perceptions of this community.
Well, first of all, I want to tell you what happened in Rochester. Originally we lived in a one-room apartment. It had a small kitchen, a bath, and a huge closet. And we slept in a pull-out bed in the living room. And then we decided we were going to try to get pregnant. And this friend of ours who was Italian, Thomas Cardillo, he says, "Oh, you're going to ruin your life, you're going to ruin your career, blah, 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 blah." But in the meantime, I was pregnant, but I didn't know it. Because I kept saying, if I'm going to be pregnant, I know I'm going to just breeze through it. Well, I was so sick that I never thought it was going to be pregnancy, which it was. So we had 2 children there. But in the meantime, we were allowed, since I was pregnant, to move to University Village, which was converted army barracks. So we were able to move there, $28 a month.
Right.
So, and George, so we were right across the street from the hospital. And George, he held down 3 different jobs during that time. He went over there after dinner to work in the blood bank, and he used to wash glassware in the lab, and then he used to do EKGs in the morning. There was something else you did.
I forget.
There were 4 things he did to earn money.
What were you doing during this time?
Well, I had 2 babies, so I was
1947 to 1958. What are you doing in your new home to kind of preserve the Italian heritage? Are you doing anything different than your mother did, or are you doing anything special?
no, except for the fact that, I was known for my good pizza and tomato sauce and meatballs and stuff like that, and we'd have people in for dinner. And then we kind of had things to do with the Cardillos, who were Italians, and they were in town, so we kind of interacted with them. But other than that, we really didn't have any contact with, except for the Cardillos, with other Italians. But I suppose the best thing I could say is that I cooked Italian.
I guess what I'm asking is kind of a follow-up to that, is that we often see children of immigrants, they're raised in an Italian home, and then they slowly kind of become Americanized, and then it's not until they become middle-aged or older that they really kind of go through a renaissance of their heritage. When did that hit you, or at all?
Well, I think once we had moved back to Erie, and of course it's a pretty Italian community. Well, I would say that just in our own family, we kept Italian customs. With the fish the night before Christmas and holidays and that sort of stuff, mainly as a family. Other than that, I'm not sure exactly.
Okay, that's fine. So you come back to Erie in 1958.
Right.
And as you've already suggested, it's a pretty large Italian community.
Yeah.
What was your impressions of that? And when you passed through Little Italy, what'd you think? Having
Never
not,
passed through Little Italy. Didn't know about Little Italy. See, we moved on 7th Street in a big house. That was the first place that we stayed. That we lived in. And I didn't like being there because the very first thing that happened when we moved in, we used to have to park with 7th Street. So we had to park on the opposite side of the street. Well, we were there just maybe not even a half an hour, and the kids were running back and forth, and my son George almost got hit by a car. So I didn't like being there. I loved the house, and I had nothing against Erie, this was new. But after we were there for about 5 years, when George started to make some money, we thought about having a summer home. So we started looking for a place out in the country. We found this ad. And so we found this place out off of Sterrettania Road. It was a house that was, the original house was over 100 years old. It was an old farm that had kind of been added on. And so we decided to buy it, but we were not gonna have it as a summer home. That was gonna be our permanent home. We weren't gonna be doing two. So we moved out there in January of 1963. And we had a series of storms. It was the worst place to be at that time, because the driveway was not a driveway, it was a right-of-way. It was half a mile from Sterrettania Road, so we were always digging people out. In fact, we used to give New Year's Eve parties for our friends. Most of them were medical. We used to spend the time digging people out. I remember Peterson's, he digs people out.
The
or
towing
takes-
company?
Yeah, towing company, right. Yeah, we gave him a lot of business. So then, in the meantime, we had weddings up there. Let's see, we had two weddings a month apart, and then I think we had two again like 6 weeks apart. So then in the meantime, then you have grandkids, and then our house was full. So we always had things all over the place, you know, and we needed a bigger house. So we tore down the old house and built a house from scratch. We were living in the barn during that period.
To what degree do you think your life has been shaped by your Italian-American heritage?
Well, I don't know. I just wish I knew about the Italian Women's Association earlier so that I could have really been active, but that just didn't happen. I'm not sure exactly what you mean.
Are there ways in which your values, your life aspirations are shaped by things that came out of your Italian heritage? That came out of your Italian home and your Italian upbringing?
Well, I think we tried to teach the kids right from wrong. We made sure that they had their communion and confirmation. We were never very religious. I mean, I have to admit that. I mean, I believe in God. I'm Catholic by heart, but I don't have the faith that I know a lot of my friends have. That, you know, you can rely on.
Do you think that's because you came from a small Italian? I mean, only 5 others in
I don't know. But again, you know, my parents were not very religious. I mean, they were good people. They did all the right things, but we were, and as I say, we did have our communion and confirmation and made sure we went to church. But
that strikes me
they
as...
didn't instill in us, and perhaps that was maybe the church's fault. I don't know. But I always felt an emptiness that I see a lot of people, well, like my 2 friends here, that are, you know, devout.
I want to open it up to questions so that...
Okay. Hope you're not pointing at us because we're in the same category as you. But, when you came to Erie, Mary, did you notice any prejudice at all because you're Italian? How was it to fit into the
Oh,
community?
yes.
Yeah, could you speak about that, please?
Well, when my husband, I don't know whether it was Italian prejudice, but I know he wanted to get into the Erie Club, and he was blackballed by one guy, but didn't prevent him from getting in. But that was probably about the only thing.
Mm-hmm.
Did you look at the Italians in Erie differently?
I don't think so.
Did you feel welcome?
I didn't have the contacts with them. You know?
There are claims about Erie that it's very tight-knit, and we've talked briefly about this, but sometimes to the point of excluding others. I've been in here in Edinburgh 15 years,
Uh-huh,
and I don't feel part of this community or Erie at all.
uh-huh.
It's very tough to break through. Did
Mhm.
you feel that in 1958, even though there's a large Italian community, that it was tough to break in, or was it different because you're in, you know, this respectable medical profession?
Well, the reason we came here was Dr. Wells and Dr. Treadway.
Both were cardiologists.
One of them also graduated from the University of
That's
Rochester.
right.
So that was our in. And they encouraged him to come. They were kind of responsible for him to come. Now, there was a Dr. Goldman, I think it was Goldman,
Yeah. it
who,
was surgery.
who was the head of the surgery department. And he didn't like you.
No, he didn't care for me.
There was some feeling there that he,
He was
I think he probably felt threatened, although George's, you know, was gonna be open heart surgery, nobody did that. I mean, it was brand new, and he was kind of against it, didn't think it was necessary and that sort of stuff. So, that part of it was a little hairy, but then, of course, after he started doing his open heart and became famous, you know, that went away, and of course, he passed away, so. But, I really didn't have too much, I didn't have any rubbing shoulders with Italians, because it just didn't happen. Well, first of all, we lived up on a hill, you know, that was another thing I would never do again. Because my children and me have missed having neighbors. And you get very close to neighbors. You see each other's children graduate and they go to school together. That's one thing we never had, and I wished that we had. So that was another reason. Because a lot of those people, Italian people up there, were in Glenwood, which whom I know and have been, you know, friendly with over the years. But that was one thing that we lacked.
You certainly have driven through Little Italy.
Yes.
When you did that back in 1958, 59, 60, did you think that was kind of a curious place?
Well, you know what,
Or had
Joe?
it changed by then?
No, I think I didn't drive through. The only place I went was Arnone's. So I would go to 16th Street and get sort of one of Arnone's and come home. So I didn't know anything about Little Italy. I mean, I think eventually I did, but during the first years that we were here, I don't think I realized it. You know? And I don't know in what way it would have affected me.
Are there things now that you do to preserve the Italian heritage
Well, of course,
for your children, grandchildren?
I do the scholarship every year for their girls, which I feel like it's it's my wish to do that and to help them. So in that way, but other than that, I guess not.
There's-
Even with all your, you know, the fact that you say, your Italianness shines through, I hear you say about making care packages for your grandchildren and making them their meatballs and.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
how aware are your grandchildren that they are part of an Italian culture?
Well, they say Grandma makes the best meatballs in the world. And I keep telling them that's because what your taste buds show you. But I don't think I make the best ones in the world. But they, again, you know, they're into the spaghetti and all the Italian foods. I mean, they've experienced it in our house. And whether they'll continue it, I don't know. Because things,
I'm sorry, Mary, go ahead.
things get fragmented later on, you know? I mean, they marry, and they marry out of an Italian And so it becomes diluted a little bit, you know, but I've tried, and I think I've succeeded in that way.
We've sat together, and the doctor and Mary have not, well, they came from nothing, both of them. Your
Oh,
father was a
yeah,
tailor.
we had
his-
nothing.
Taylor, right,
His
right.
father was a tailor, and are you familiar with the D'Angelo? That's
Yeah. Oh,
named-
absolutely.
That's named after Mary, and they have been very special philanthropists in
Right,
Erie.
right.
And so it's interesting, now I guess you didn't feel any prejudice, well, let me just ask another question, about your mother. Was she, your mother or your father, do you feel your mother had the greatest impact on you? And they're different, I know, but,
I think so. And my father too, because I sort of kind of inherited his love for music through him.
but what about her strength? Do you feel like your characteristics are like your mother's, or?
Well, yeah. But she had it tough with 7 kids, and she, you know, she worked most of the time. And of course, I can remember having to come home from school and cook dinner, you know, because let's see, my brother got married first. He was the second, and then then when we moved to Bethlehem, a couple of the other ones got married. So, but for a long time, I used to have to come home and get dinner.
I want to ask a question, and you don't have to answer it. Your philanthropy, I can't imagine anyone that hasn't heard your name, right? And it's done out of the goodness of your heart
Right,
to give back to the community.
right.
Is there also a sense of pride in knowing that name is going to be up there, and they'll remember that people who came from nothing can still give back? Is there a certain pride in knowing, you know what? This is an Italian name, and this is an Italian.
Absolutely.
Can you talk to me about that more? I mean,
Well,
when you see that name up there, you don't just see yourself. You see, what do you see?
well, I see an Italian name that will be carried on, you know, through generosity, and hopefully it'll be there forever. But you never know.
When you see the name up in lights, do you see certain individuals? You know, I see my name on the door, and I think, oh, that's my name, but I also see my father and my grandfather.
Oh.
What do you conjure up, like, I wish they could see?
Absolutely. So many times I wished my father would, because my father died right after we got married. We were married in July, and he died in October from cancer. He was a heavy smoker, smoked Lucky Strike. But I wish so many times that he could have, because he loved music so much, and he's where my love of music came from. And you know, and we all had talent. So this came from my mom and dad used to sing at weddings. My father didn't have a very good voice, but I'm not sure about my mother. But he used to sing opera all the time at home, you know. And so how it started with our philanthropy is, of course, always in George's house. They sang all the old Italian songs, you know, which is fine. We used to do that a lot when they had dinners on Sunday nights, and we'd end up singing. But in my house, we mostly listened to opera. And like I say, there were 5 of us that sang. And this is another thing I forgot to mention, after we moved to Bethlehem, he bought the restaurant and he started to make a little money and save it. He had $10,000 saved up. So my teacher told my parents and me that she felt she'd done all she could for me, and that I should go to New York and develop a repertoire. Well, first of all, I was not gonna take that $10,000 of my parents and do that. Secondly, I had already met George. So, what's the word I want? It's terrible. I didn't have the, what is it that you need to really get some?
Motivation, motivation.
I didn't have the motivation. No, and I would have been scared to death. What was I gonna be in New York? This little hick town, Mary, you know? If I had had, like I say, if I had had a patron, knew somebody there, or, no. But,
But to come from that, and there's a statue of Dr. Course Hammond, big gold statue. And so that will be there. And it's an interesting story. Did you notice any prejudices getting to the medical community? You said you didn't in terms of the auxiliary, there's always a medical auxiliary.
no,
You didn't.
No.
Did you?
No,
no, and I think that what we did feel was not discrimination as to our heritage, but more political.
Oh.
Because even George we wanted to go back to Bethel, Allentown, and he wrote to the head of the hospital at Allentown Hospital,
no,
was it?
Bethlehem,
And he wrote back in no terms, we don't need you here, you know. That's not the way he put it, but then later on we found out that his son was coming there to do open heart surgery.
Sure.
So, you know, it was political.
Sure. Well, let me ask, we just ran out of time on the camera. Do you have time for more, or do you wanna swap seats while you tell me what you guys wanna do? Because,
With Dr. you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea.
Is that-
I
are
don't
you-
know how we will segment it, but I think it's an opportunity that would be missed.
right, and I think we can
Can
also,
we put you in that chair?
Sure.
we can get that story, the mainline story, but we can also then tie it in,
Okay.
so that
would be
you
great.
get-
Can I find
Yeah,
If there is anything
He
like
had a
this.
little different upbringing, you know, his father being a
do you know
tailor,
where,
they were really
there's a
poor.
faculty one right around this
Angela
corner.
was gonna have a hard time getting off of there.
Is it just, let me help you.
Yeah, it's,
Your
you know how
coat,
there's the
doctor.
men's room is on this side, there's the women's on the
Your
opposite.
coat, yeah.
Thank
It's
you.
just
You're
around.
very welcome.
And we're gonna get a little jump started here, 1 or 2 seconds. Okay, we're gonna start the same way. I need
Okay.
your full birth name
okay.
and your date of birth.
My full name is George Joseph D'Angelo, and I was born on November 8th, 1923. That was it,
Okay, and where were you born?
in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Okay. We heard by way of background a little bit about your upbringing, but tell us about your parents, their names, and what they did, and the way they influenced you.
Well, my mother was Josephine D'Angelo, and my dad was Mario D'Angelo. So that's where I was born, in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Okay, so your mother's maiden name was D'Angelo?
Yes, right. She
Okay.
was third, what do you call, cousin or something like that.
Second cousins, I think.
Second or third.
I'm not sure.
Okay, so they're cousins
It's legal,
of some
whatever.
sort
Yeah.
that were married, so they're both D'Angelos.
That's right.
Okay, what did they do?
Well, my dad's a tailor. Mother is just has helped him considerably, so that's been important.
Okay, so is this a working class family?
Yes, yes.
Would you say it was poor or
No,
middle
well,
class?
Only child.
Dad is a middle class, or most of the people from Bethlehem Steel who worked there brought their clothes to my dad because Dad was
He's Taylor.
was a tailor,
He's an expert. tailor.
expert tailor in that area.
Were they first generation? Were they
He
born?
was first generation, that's
Okay,
right.
so he was born in the United States.
No, he was
No,
not.
no.
They
Oh,
were
okay.
both born in Italy.
Okay. Speak Italian in the home?
Yes, well, he spoke Italian in the home.
Okay. And how many siblings?
So we had five, how many siblings?
4 children.
4 children.
Okay. And where were you? You were the number one?
number one, right.
Okay. Tell me about the Italian traditions in the home.
Well, in the home, so weekends was the Italian coffee and Italian, everything was Italian. So
Okay.
that's where
Like Sunday dinners, were they
they were
the big-
always Italian.
Okay. And was this an Italian community, an
It was
Italian neighborhood?
No, it was Italian,
No.
well, it was a community, but,
They were part of a big Italian community, but not where they lived.
Okay. Okay. And so talk to me about growing up in this home. When did you know you were Italian? Did
no, from the very beginning that we knew, I knew that we were Italian.
He didn't speak in English when he started school.
okay.
He couldn't speak English.
Okay. How about you tell me that? When did you learn how to
Speak Italian,
English?
In
American was
school.
in school.
Okay. No offense, but
That's all
I know.
right. I understand. I'll behave.
Is that typical of Italian women that,
No.
that they dominate conversations?
No, they
and-
don't.
All right, so you're growing up and you knew from the very beginning that
That's
you were
right.
Italian.
That's
Did-
right.
Did you experience discrimination?
Well, only when I went to school a little bit, not much, not as
Okay.
much as I thought I would have.
Like name calling?
Name was George D'Angelo. That was it.
Right. But I mean, did they call you,
No.
horrible things?
No, they didn't call me any names because I just was a part of them.
Okay. What were your expectations?
When I graduated from University of Rochester, from Lehigh University, I graduated and went to University of Rochester Medical School.
Right.
And I was there in class of 51.
Okay.
And there were, I forget, something like 50-some people that graduated with me,
65.
65.
Okay. So, but let's jump back a little bit.
Yeah,
You're the son of an Italian tailor,
Tailor, that's
in
right.
Bethlehem.
that's right.
And it's a working class, middle class family. This
I did the tailoring for a while.
okay.
It was always a weekend, of course.
Was that something that you thought that was going to be your life path that you?
No, it was just something I was going to be able to do, but not necessarily, because my idea was to become a physician, and that
What-
was what.
And where did you get that idea that was an opportunity for you? That was a possibility
Well, possibility of
of becoming a surgeon.
surgeon. Well, that's what I was going to become a surgeon. I was going to become a cardiologist, and that was it.
But so, how do you shift from being I'm working, helping my father in the tailor shop
Mhm.
to I'm going to be a cardiologist? Where did
Yeah.
you get that idea?
I wanted to go to the University of Rochester
Okay.
Medical Center, and that was it.
Can I tell you?
Go ahead, jump in.
He was inspired by that play that you were in, that famous, the mosquito, the disease that the mosquito brought.
Well, yeah.
What was-
Encephalitis?
What?
A play about the encephalitis?
No. The very famous person that found
Oh,
out
oh.
about the mosquito carrying.
Mm-hmm.
There was a
The
play, and
vaccine.
he took the part. And I know that's where you started
Right, that's
to
where I
decide
started.
on
Okay.
medicine.
So, this may seem like an unusual question, and I've never asked anyone this question, but there seems some kind of unusual parallels between tailoring
Mm-hmm.
Oh.
and surgery.
There was, in a way, because when I took up tailoring, I figured it was a part of being a physician, and that's how I kept going.
Do you think the ability to work, and understand patterns and also be able to stitch things together, that there's some,
No,
no?
there was none that I experienced.
Okay.
So,
So you go off to college. How did you afford to go to college?
well, my dad was making some money then, and, he made, what was it, 100 some thousand?
Oh, I don't know, darling,
Oh. He
I
made
think-
some good money, and that's why I was going to school there at University of Rochester.
No, but you're growing up in the 30s and 40s,
40s, right?
and there's still significant discrimination against Italians,
That's right.
and there's some horrible stereotypes
Mm-hmm.
of Italians. That Italians are all mobsters.
No, that's
Mhm.
true. That's wrong.
Okay. Did
Because-
you see any of those kind of folks?
No, I didn't see many of those folks really. But a lot of them were American Italians, and that was it.
Okay.
You should ask him about his interview at Rochester.
Okay. The video captured the audio, I'm sure, so why didn't you tell us about your
University of
interview
Rochester?
at the University of
Rochester
Rochester?
Medical School. Well, I told them I wanted to go there, and that's what I started to tell them. And they asked me the same thing as you are asking me today, is what did my dad do? My dad was a physician, a tailor, and I did some of the work weekends, and that was it.
Okay. Did they question, your Italian heritage?
So much.
Well, go ahead.
Okay, go ahead.
The dean of the school was, he got the award, what is a big award? For fighting pernicious anemia, Nobel Prize.
Okay.
So he was Nobel Prize. And he interviewed him, never even asked him anything except, what do you do at vacation, and this and that, and anyway, he was one of, 65?
Yeah.
No, one of two that were chosen from Pennsylvania.
That's right.
Do you think they were more concerned about your character than they were about the knowledge you had going in?
Yes, there's no question about it. They were interested in my character.
Why would that be important?
Well, because it was important because of what I experienced, and also what I used to tell them, and I was interested in the what is it they call the
Surgery?
no, I was not interested in the
Oh.
surgery aspect of it, but I was just in the
The human relations?
relations.
Patient
Patient
relationship. Okay.
Yeah,
So, I'm gonna jump us ahead,
sure.
okay? And in 1958, we learned, let's go back. In 1947, you marry this young woman,
Yeah, that's right.
okay? You'd been seeing her for what, 5 years?
We're,
4 years, maybe?
42 to
46,
47.
Okay.
5 years.
Tell me about, the first time you met this woman. We heard her side of the story. I want to hear the real story.
The real story is that I enjoyed myself tremendously. I enjoyed being with her and so forth, and figured that she was an excellent individual
Okay.
rather than just anybody.
Well, but you're standing in a phone line ready to call a young lady.
Yeah,
Do you remember who it was?
it was her
Well,
most of the time.
No, but you were standing in the
I know
phone at
who
the
it was.
dance. Do you know who it was?
You did.
Irene Herzig.
Herzig.
Okay.
That's the only
You were
one.
gonna call her,
Yeah,
and then you meet this young lady,
Yeah.
and suddenly your eyes start to sparkle, and
that's right. And then I became interested in her more so than Irene Herzog.
you were pretty persistent in chasing her.
Oh, yes.
Was
I
she
was-
constantly on your mind, or
No,
what was
well,
going
she was on my mind, but also I felt that she was tremendous, and that's why I pursued her.
Did you ever put yourself in situations just to come across her? Like when you were eating those chocolate-covered nuts, did you know she was in that jewelry store and that you
No.
deliberately walked by to?
No,
No, he,
Okay. What'd you think when you saw her?
oh, well, I thought she was a tremendous woman that I could, work with,
It's really pretty.
and she was pretty at the time, so I felt that she'd be a good person to, what do you call it,
To court or?
to court her.
Yeah.
Mhm.
All right, so now, what do your parents think of her?
Well, my parents sort of liked her in a way, but they never showed it too greatly.
Why?
I don't know why.
Father loved me.
His father, my father enjoyed her. Mother
Yeah.
didn't care for her as much.
Okay. Was that because you were their number one son?
Son, that's right.
Okay. What did her family think of you?
Oh, well, I couldn't get along with her father too well, but her mother, I did.
Okay, so she got along with your father and you got along with her mother.
Yeah, that's right.
Was there some gender rivalry there?
Comedian doing that.
Well,
That's cute.
there was no comedian. I enjoyed the mother more so than the father because I didn't see him as often, and that was it.
Go ahead,
So-
Mary. So what you-
Go ahead.
No, my father, he was a big comedian during that period.
Your father was.
No, he
Oh,
was.
okay.
So my father thought he was kind of a fool. And I used to say to him, you know, you're going to be a physician someday. Stop acting like a fool. I would say that to him. And my father didn't like that quality about what he, you know, about being a comedian all the time. You got out of that a long time ago.
Yeah.
All right, so there's this.
I have to tell you this. You want to turn it off?
No, go ahead. I've never had to move the camera so much.
When we were in medical school, they used to have a big celebration after the tests. He was a stripper with yes, he shocked me. I didn't talk to him for 2 weeks.
Oh, what, how
He
much?
had-
How much?
He did this dance with a bra and apples in the bra and I didn't even know they had planned it. You remember that?
You remember that?
So he was a big comic during that period.
Okay, well, I
And
can't.
didn't like
I can't resist asking. This little routine you did. Is this an Italian tradition?
No,
No,
it's not.
and to this day, I don't know how it came about.
Okay, so you've decided after 4 years, 5 years, that you're gonna take the dive and you're gonna marry.
Yeah, you're gonna marry her.
Was it a traditional wedding?
Yes, it was.
Okay. You're standing at the altar.
That's right.
You see her. What? Tell me what happens.
It wasn't traditional.
Oh.
What do you see coming down? What do you see coming down the aisle?
Well, with her father.
Okay.
Go ahead, Mary. Can I say
Describe it.
It wasn't a traditional wedding.
What do you mean?
We had.
You can lean back because the camera.
We had a
catches you.
Jewish best man. We had an Episcopalian usher, and a converted Catholic, and we had a Jewish fellow who played the violin. So he really had to get special permission to have that Jewish person in. This is in '47.
You know,
The
with those,
priest had to give permission for that.
with that kind of wedding, you might want to consider having a lot of priests over for dinner.
That was the original.
This now, I want to step back though, because we know that you get married in '47, you started dating in '42, but you went off into the service too, right?
What was the service?
43 when it
43.
was.
Okay. Can you tell me a little bit about your service? Where did you go? What did you do?
No, I stayed at the University of Rochester.
Okay.
No,
Stay.
you went to service before that.
During the war, what did you do?
Did you
What
do
did I do?
anything?
1943, you went into the war. You went to Columbia University
University, oh, I went to
for your
Columbia.
ensign, to
Yeah.
become an ensign.
But did you stay in the United States?
Stayed
You
in the
didn't see
United
foreign
States.
service though? Okay. So '47, you get married.
That's
No,
right.
he was in the Okinawa campaign.
Your Okinawa campaign.
Okay. Okay. So you
And he
did.
also went to Tokyo when MacArthur was there.
Okay. So you're seeing significant. What's that like when your boyfriend is off fighting in the war. You want to get married. You said that earlier.
Yeah, well, I just had to pray and hope that he would come back. You know, we were writing to each other all the time.
Okay. What were you thinking?
I was thinking that I'd, marry her someday, so I kept writing doing letters to her every day. So that was it.
Nice.
Were you in a field hospital, doctor?
No, I was not in a field hospital.
No, he wasn't doing any, he wasn't doing anything
No.
like that.
No,
So but you were there as a medical.
yeah, it's medical
He
student,
was,
Okay.
he was on an LSM 221,
221.
and they were bringing ammunition and also soldiers. Weren't you also bringing
Soldiers to
Okinawa?
Okinawa, yes.
Okay.
Do
Okay.
you have to ask for her hand from her father?
Well, that's a good question. Did you? Is there any special kind of passage or rite that you have to go through to get permission to marry Mary? Do you have to ask for her father's permission?
Well, I asked for his permission and then mother's permission, but that was merely something that I wouldn't normally do.
Right. I mean, but was it? Can you describe that process? I mean, did they question you? Did they
Well,
say,
my,
okay, sure?
Their father questioned me a little
Your
bit.
parents came to dinner at our house, and
Yeah.
that was kind of the ceiling situation, you know.
What-
We knew we wanted to get married, and they knew. And then when his parents came to our house for dinner, that was kind of put the seal on things.
Okay. You go to medical school.
Yes,
And you complete all the different things, the residencies and all that kind of stuff. And in 1958, you decide to move to Erie.
no, when did we move to Erie?
No, somebody who was beneath him was Shavel.
Shawl, yeah. He,
Told him that
He was
he should go to Erie because nobody was doing his kind of work.
Okay.
So he made contact with Treadway, who was at University of Rochester, a graduate. And he and Dr. Wells, who were big during that period, encouraged him to come here to
Okay.
Erie.
But that was in 1958.
58, right.
Okay. And you're coming to a totally new community.
That's right.
What was that like? How do you fit in?
Well, just by virtue of the fact that I was getting patients from both Treadway and Wells, that's all.
Now, ultimately, you achieve a certain level of fame.
That's right.
Why?
Well, because I was the only one doing it there.
You invented something.
Right. Well, so
Yeah.
that's why
Open heart
I'm.
surgery was somewhat at its infancy at that time.
Okay. Can you tell us the developments that you made as a contribution to heart surgery?
Well, I started the whole thing. Started the taking the vein out of a leg and putting it into the cardiac.
Yeah. Okay.
Very important. He applied to,
What's that do?
no, you applied to some insurance company for a grant to start, what's the thing you get before they get,
Operating on the esophagus.
no. You have a test to find out if the heart is, if the valves are blocked.
Catheterization.
Catheterization.
Oh, catheterization.
He got $100,000 grant from the Stanford was it? It was an insurance company, I think it was Stanford,
I don't know who it was.
to start working on catheterization.
It had never been done.
Mhm. And so, are you saying? Because I know of your fame, but I don't know.
Yeah,
That taking the vein from the leg
yeah, that's right.
and applying it to the heart cavity,
Mm-hmm.
that was first practiced by you.
Yes,
Well, you added about 20 years to my father's life, so
That's right.
I appreciate it.
Wow.
So, do you feel like when you're in Erie that you're this big fish? Because you.
No, I feel that as long as I'm head of the music department, that's fine.
the contributions you made
Yes,
brought you a sense of fame, but also you turned that wealth into philanthropy,
right,
right?
yes,
And she's always been right there,
that's right. That's why I
steering
named
you
it
on.
her, the music department of the,
Numbers here.
of the,
Where's yours?
Mercer's was named after her,
Right.
music department.
Okay. I guess I want to kind of focus your comments about her,
Yeah,
because A, she'll talk to us about it anyway.
Yeah.
And B, a lot of this project is dealing with Italian-American women.
right.
How would you characterize Italian-American women in general?
They were
Are they different than German women?
somewhat, in a way, yeah.
How?
You better say yes.
How are we different?
How are Italian women different?
Well, they're more outgoing,
Yeah, prettier.
and they're more attractive.
Okay.
See? I knew it was on the tip of his tongue.
Well, this may sound like a silly question. Are Italian men more attracted to Italian women?
That's right, they are,
Okay.
they were.
Would your family have had an objection to you marrying a Polish girl or a German girl?
Maybe so, I don't know, it's hard to say.
This Herzog, she wasn't Italian.
No, she was not Italian.
Did your family know about that, or?
No, I don't think so.
Are your brother's wife?
My brother's wife, yeah.
Yeah, she's
No,
I
she
think
didn't
she's
know anything about it.
Ukrainian or something.
Yeah, she thought she was a Ukrainian.
Your brother's wife is named?
Herzog.
No.
Oh, no.
I don't know her last name, but
My brother's wife,
I think her parents were Ukrainian.
Ukrainian.
Okay. Because there for a second I was afraid you were trying to pick up on your brother's wife there. Phew! A little concerned. So your parents may or may not have had any objection to
her.
or to Poles or Germans, but there was a little tension between your parents and her.
Yeah.
Not his father. But I still say it was just a matter of the fear that he wouldn't go ahead with his dreams.
When you first got married, that's
Mhm.
quite a while,
Yeah.
while ago, right? 63 years?
63 years.
What was the date again? I didn't.
51.
No, the.
Oh.
July 19th, 1947.
July 19th. So we're coming up on 64, right? We're just about a month away from your 64th anniversary.
Oh, that's right. I was thinking it was 63.
Yeah.
Well, it is 63 right now, but you'll be
Yeah.
64 here in a
Right,
month, right?
right.
I guess my question is, when you first got married, what did you think Mary should do? Should she be a stay-at-home mom? Should she get a career? What did you think your new bride, what her place ought to be?
Well, when I thought of it, I thought she should find some work. And she was working at the jewelry store, so I figured if she could continue with it, that'd be great.
Okay. Here's.
I worked for a year in University of Rochester as soon as we got there. Then when I got pregnant, that whole thing changed. When we moved to Durham, we had 2 children, and 3 were born there. And I also went to work there for about a year or 2. And then my daughter had this terrible case of chicken pox. Oh, it's just awful. And I couldn't go to work and see her there, so I just gave it up. So, but I did work at some time during our marriage.
I guess my question is, here you are, you're going off to medical school,
That's right,
and you have high aspirations for yourself.
that's right.
Was it typical for a man during that time period to think that the wife could do the same thing, and that the wife had the right to also go on and become a doctor, an engineer, president?
No,
I don't think there was
No.
anything like that at all.
Okay.
not at all.
Why?
Because I just felt she was not,
Well, first of all, I was not educated.
you're not
I didn't
educated,
go to
but
college.
you went to college.
I didn't go.
Oh, you didn't go to college.
But I mean,
And
Go
I
ahead.
had no aspirations other than to be a good mother and a good wife.
Did you learn from your mother?
Pardon?
Did you saw your mother, you wanted to be like your mother?
Yeah, well, I don't say as my mother, but
So it's following in those footsteps.
Yeah.
But your family would have had high expectations of
Basically,
you,
Of me, yes.
right?
oh, definitely, yes.
I have never moved the camera so much. I'm trying to kind of wrestle with, you know, where women's roles were and what their status was, not necessarily in the realities of life, but in your hearts. What could they do? Where could they go? You know what I'm saying? So, I guess, help me with some questions here.
Do you ever regret, Mary? I mean, did you ever think, wow, you know, I wonder if
No,
I could have been
I didn't want a career, and I
an opera
was,
singer, I meant, you know.
I wasn't motivated to really be an opera singer. Well, the kids always say they were glad I never was because maybe they wouldn't be here.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Um,
That's a great way of putting
no, I think once we got married, that I was just focused on being a good mother and,
it. And supporting
yeah.
George.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Right.
And then we had Pavarotti as our,
That's right, they entertained Pavarotti
entertained Pavarotti
in their home.
in our
Wow.
home.
They brought him to
They
Erie
brought him to Erie and,
when
yeah.
he was first starting out.
1979, April 23rd.
Oh, she
You know,
remembers
what
the
was the date?
My mind even shocks me.
Yeah, April?
April?
Was it April?
1979, April 23rd.
Yeah, 1979.
What was it
We
like?
had Doc Severinsen on Saturday night and Pavarotti on Sunday afternoon.
What was he like?
Oh, he's a lot of fun. He,
Do you eat a lot?
when we came in, we wanted him to come in the front door, but he wanted to go around the back where the three daughters came in. And he came in with them, and then he came in the kitchen, and he was lifting up pots and pans and doing this to everybody. And it kind of set the scene, you know?
Very hot
Because
home.
somebody as, you know, as big as he was, you know, kind of relaxed us all.
Fun.
Did you sing for him?
Yes, he sang for us too. We had Mrs. Tulio sang, my daughter-in-law sang, I sang, Pauline Scott sang,
This is truly
And-
the mayor's.
and Pavarotti's girlfriend sang.
She came with him? Even though
Well,
he's
she
married?
was his secretary, but that's another whole story.
But she likes Bocelli, right?
Oh, you like Bocelli, yeah.
Oh,
He's
me
very
too.
good,
Me too.
yeah.
Okay. So, more questions. Help me out here.
Okay, one of the questions, like, what, are you disappointed in some ways that maybe the children aren't carrying on, you know, some of the Italian traditions, maybe not just the food, but some of the celebrations of the holidays of having fish before, you know, when making certain breads at certain times or certain cookies at certain times. Do you wish that would have happened, and are you?
Well, as far as carrying on tradition, I don't see it.
Yeah.
And secondly, as far as cookies and candies and stuff like that, I'm disappointed that maybe, because I do make some really special things that they're just not gonna be there.
Yeah, those, it's lost.
You know,
forever.
particularly my candy that I make. Who knows? You never know.
Yeah,
They
it's
might
disappointing.
take it up later on.
Yeah.
Like pizzelles and
Have either of you been back to Italy?
No,
many
yes.
many times. Yes.
Okay.
Twice.
Yes.
At least twice.
And why?
Well, we used to travel. We always well, our daughter went to college in England, and from there we went to Italy when we took her over there. And then we just made trips there. We were there for weddings, and we were on cruises, and we would stop there.
You still have family there, then, Mary?
Oh, he has lots of family there.
We have
He
family.
has lots of cousins.
Do you feel,
Lots.
do you feel comfortable in Italy? Like when you return to Italy, do you feel like you're kind of at home?
Yes.
You always felt.
Even though you weren't born there, you
That's
weren't
right.
raised
Oh, yeah.
there.
Treated
Oh,
like
yeah.
royalty.
Why? Why is there a certain comfort level?
Because there's
It's in your blood.
what do you call,
Kind of a
Well, the
cultural
friendly
affinity.
list.
a friendly list of the families.
Okay.
It's sort of an honoring, isn't it? An honoring of, you know, your families, even though they may not know you, like, because they knew your parents, or because you're the same name or the same blood, you're really treated like royalty, were you not? Treated like royalty?
Yes.
Norma would say the same thing,
Oh,
and I would say the
absolutely.
same thing.
But is it also a tribute back to them?
Yeah.
That in fact,
Right.
they are of such high esteem that you're coming back to see them and be
Yeah,
there
it's-
because
It's all of those
that's
things.
their roots.
Yeah.
It's all
Well, you
those
know,
things.
I always said that his family is an enigma. They're still back with their traditions and everything. They don't take to all these new fangled stuff.
But you know,
Like-
you're hitting on something kind of interesting, and I think we were talking about in the car about respect, and I think that that is something that it would be hard for them or us to even explain, but it is not only tradition, but it really is in culture, that, you know, you do have a different respect. We talk about nurses, I'm a nurse, respecting, you know, physicians a long time ago, but also Italians, that's something I think that is also very cultural with Italians, in terms of respecting elders, respecting, I don't know that that's carried on in other generations, but that was actually a big part of what we were into.
Do you think there's tension between the Italians that stayed and the Italians that left? Is there any kind of resentment, maybe? I don't know, I'm just playing that out, these certain Italians left for a better life and maybe some of us got stuck staying in Italy. Or is it the other way around, that they
I don't think
the
so.
ones that went to the
Yeah.
United States abandoned us? And then-
Truthfully, I think that they're envious. They're envious, in a sense, that, you know, we live in a country that has the reputation as the United States does. And, but, on the other hand, they're very proud of their own being Italian, and they're Italy. They know their politics, they know their, everything that's going on in their
Nationalist.
country. They know so much more. They're so in tune with what is happening in Italy, as opposed to what we do in this country, where a lot of us maybe aren't as knowledgeable as we ought to be about our own history. And they know more about Paul Revere, for instance,
Then Sarah Palin did.
Yeah,
Sarah
well,
Palin knew.
everybody knows more than Sarah Palin.
Truthfully,
Well, knowing
when
George's
they-
family, his cousins, and knowing them over the years, I don't think any of them would resent they're proud of him.
Oh,
They
yes.
don't resent anything that we have. And of course they do very well. They're not poor. They
Not
don't,
anymore.
you know, like my parents came from, you know, my
Yeah.
father came from Calabria and probably lived in a cave, and my mother, you know, they lived in small towns where they really suffered. But his family, they were in Naples. They had an apartment with marble floors, and you know, not that they were rich, but they
Yeah,
they were
didn't
comfortable.
suffer. You know what
Sure.
I mean?
Well, and to that point, they were earlier, because I'm from Calabria as well,
Oh,
and my family and my cousins there also, you know, I don't think they resent at all. I think they kind of feel sorry for the ones that had to leave because there wasn't, you know, work there, or as you said, was
Mhm.
poor.
sure.
And they really because they've come to visit, and they would come to my mother's house, for instance, from Italy, and they would feel sorry in a way for us because we have to work so hard to have so little, and they feel they have so much. They have the land, they have family, their children live there. They feel sorry. They're the only people. I have friends who say to me, "Oh, your kids are out of town. That's good, you know." And I have never gotten over the fact that they all moved out of town. The women and the husbands too, they understand, they cry with you. They say, oh, you know, because their children still live in their houses. They live in the villas, first floor, second floor.
Mhm.
Right, Mary?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let me ask another question in general, since this has turned into
To
a group discussion.
And we talked about having these
Right,
groups.
And this is great because it gives us some unique perspectives. I want to bring it back to women, but also making that difference, and maybe another way of thinking about women in Italy and and the United States, Italian Americans, is to ask questions about men. How are men, Italian American men, different than Italian men? Does that make sense? There's a
I think so.
a
You mean
huge
you mean
difference.
the ones that stayed there?
Yeah, how are Italian men in Italy different than Italian American men in the United States?
I think there's still control, everyone should have a, I'd be interested in your viewpoints. My feeling is that they're still dominant in the sense of, I mean, the female has a lot of dominance as well, but in terms of expectations for the women, there's still, at least in San Lucido in Calabria, there's still, do not expect the women to be educated. And that has changed, like they got their first supermarket, so things are changing. But, and this is not the case obviously in Rome. Rome is totally,
Yeah, big
Rome is like the
cities.
United States. But in those small villages still, that are still authentically Italian as they were, then they have cell phones and TVs, but they're not infected by them. You know, they're, like we are, they're affected by them, they use them, but TVs are still background, and the guys still are the breadwinners. The woman is supposed to keep the home, she's supposed to take care of the children, but she doesn't work outside, she doesn't use the ATM machine, you know, none of that.
But was the machismo, kind of that chauvinism,
Still there.
that's still in place in parts of Italy,
Mhm.
was that something that we perhaps saw in earlier phases in Italian American men?
Yeah.
Because the
Definitely.
way you tell your story,
What do you
it doesn't
think?
sound like there's that machismo that you might find in Italy. But even though he's an Italian American, he's treating women differently than Italian men would treat.
From what I have observed, because both husbands were not Italian, but what I have observed, and from what Italian American women have told me, is that some Italian American men who are first generation or going into the second generation still seek to dominate.
Mhm.
They still seek
Control.
to see tradition carried on, even though they may not. But I see it. I see in how they treat their wives, or not that they beat them or anything else, but there's that dominance, that.
But Mike, I guess here I'm going to throw something back at you on that. Is that a lesson that men learned, Italian American men learned, not from their fathers, but something from their mothers, because of that doting nature?
Perhaps.
And that strange kind of dynamic
say
that you
yes.
got along with the father-in-law and you got along with the mother-in-law, but when it was the same gender, same sex, there was some tensions there.
Absolutely, I think you're onto
What,
something.
could be.
what do you think?
Well, I think that's right. That's right.
I do too.
I agree.
Mhm.
Okay.
I agree.
You're a different Italian American man.
That's right, I am. I believe in
Equality of
quality
women.
of women.
Mhm.
Okay.
So that's,
And you took good care of her.
Yeah.
You did not treat her as a subordinate.
no,
He was never around to treat me.
What's interesting though is the deference Italian women learned toward men carried on in our relations as well.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Izzy is juvenile diabetic, and I suspect she has to go check her blood.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
But yeah, I think that carried on though with, because we learned, women learned to be, I mean, I had an older brother, 13 years older than me, and he sat in the chair, he didn't get married till he was 32 or 33, and when he came home from the Navy, I think I was still in grade school, but at any rate, my sister and I had to cater to my brother, and my mother would say, hey, get your brother, he's a thirsty, get him, she would tell us what to do for him. So, and I think we learned, and that same deference carried on, I know in my own relations. It was very easy for me to fit into the culture in medicine because there was deference to physicians, and that seemed like a natural for a few years until I no longer felt that way. But that was, you know, something I think that we did learn, don't you think? We learned as women to be with our fathers, with our brothers, with our
Yeah, sure.
husbands.
I'm gonna ask one last question, because we're running out of tape here. And I'm gonna start with you, and then we'll end with you, and you guys have had your shots.
Yeah.
If you could send a message to your grandchildren, or send a message back to your parents,
Yeah.
what would you say?
Well, my grandchildren would be a little different than what it is.
Sure.
My parents would receive. My parents would get a letter saying, you know, everything's going fine, so forth. So,
What would you say to your grandchildren? If when they look at this film 50 years from now,
yeah,
what would you like them to hear? What would you like to tell them?
tell them that they are part of this group.
Okay.
What?
What would you tell your grandchildren? You have a chance to send a message right now that in
Well,
50 years
I
they'll
would-
be able to see.
I would tell them, and I do think they do, that they are proud of their Italian heritage. And to a degree, I think that deep down in their heart, they all are proud to be Italians.
What would you, if you could send a message? This has the ability to go back in time and send a message to your parents.
Oh, to my parents.
What would you say?
I guess I would have to say that I'm so sorry that they were not around to experience our success. And particularly George in what he's accomplished in this city.
Okay,
Okay?
very good.
Very nice. Like Spain and Portugal and Italy, there's just something innate about the way we present ourselves to other people.
The way you treat people.
Yeah.
The way the warmth is there, which you don't
Yeah.
very often find in like German or.
What's the
Sure.
most?
We
I
talked
have the
about
camera
that.
back on, so I'm going to keep going. What's the most important thing in life?
I guess family. Love, family.
Is that because you can say that because you've accumulated the wealth? There are some Americans who are going to say, you know, you gotta make it.
Money. No, that was.
Did the money make you happy?
Well,
It made you
it makes
more
you happier.
It's honest, it's
secure.
honest.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But in the end, it's family.
yeah, I think so. I mean, certainly neither one of us come from wealth of any kind. In fact, I always say the only thing, we had nothing.
No.
The only thing I have in my mother's is a purse that my brother, who joined the army at 15 because he lied about his age. Oh, he's been all over the world. Brought her from Hong Kong. It's a beautiful beaded purse. The only thing I have, because we didn't have anything. You know how people
Yes.
inherit furniture
Yeah,
or whatever.
antiques.
I don't have anything in my mother. Now I think your family has some things of your mother.
Maybe so.
See, I think that makes it, I think being poor, because we certainly didn't have, well, you know,
We didn't
I
think
told the
we
story,
were
my
poor,
father
but-
died, you know, when I was 14 months old and my mother went to work at the seminary. I mean, we didn't have money either. And the thing about it is I think it makes you see more clearly. I think if our generation made a mistake was giving too much to our children. And because I think you can see more clearly, you have, all you have is the food and the relationships. And you learn at an early age that must be all that's important because, you know, you're happy. And so oftentimes we hear about African American families, whatever, that sing or stories of coal mines when, you know, children of coal miners were, and I think poverty, you can see the forest through the trees
Mhm.
better,
Mm-hmm.
I think.
Yeah.
Well, so many of our
And maybe that's the
women-
benefit of frugality now, I don't know.
So many of the women who sat in that chair and were interviewed said well, we were poor, but we didn't know we were
That's
poor.
right,
No,
that's
that's
right.
right, we
Know it,
didn't,
You know,
we
it
didn't.
was like, well, this is life and this is the way it is and.
You couldn't
You had
mistake.
food on the table, you had clothes on your,
And you couldn't mistake, that other things were more important because you didn't have them,
yeah.
Yeah, let me ask a question, because in July 19th,
Right,
64 years.
64 years, what's the key to a
There
long
isn't.
marriage?
Long, happy
there
marriage.
isn't. I don't think there's an answer.
Well, what it would-
People ask me that all the time, and I don't know,
Well, you obviously have such respect for each other, because he says you were tremendous and everything, and you, I think you.
well, I guess you could say true love,
Hmm.
if it's true love, you weather the bad times and put up with, and enjoy the good times, and other than that, I don't know that there is an answer.
Well, but you said something right there that I think is important, that you weather the bad times. Is it possible that, today, when things get hard, they give up?
Yeah, sure. But you
I
have
mean,
to.
but you guys weathered some hard times.
Oh, yes,
Yes.
oh, yes.
There were lots of times you were alone because he was working long shifts
Oh,
and
yeah. Yeah, for the first,
Couple of years.
not couple. First, well, first of all, during our internship, during med school and internships, you were not around. And then when you started your practice, he used to, when he first started his open heart, he used to do them on a Tuesday and a Thursday, and he always stayed there stayed at the hospital.
Sure.
So I would go down to the university club, have dinner with him, and then he'd go back to the hospital, and then he was working till 10, 11 o'clock
Sure.
each night.
how do you cope with that? How do you get by?
I knew it had to be, I accepted it, and I had kids to take care of, so that,
By yourself.
you know,
By yourself.
but no, there was lots of times we couldn't make a party because and I accepted it. I never, berated him about it or anything because I knew I had to do it. I knew he couldn't have helped it, whatever. If he had an emergency, he had to go to the hospital and take care of it. So I always I knew that being a doctor's wife was not going to be easy, but being a heart surgeon's wife was even worse.
Mhm.
Do Italian American men and Italian American women that are married, do they fight differently? Is there? I watch films, okay, and I know that they're stereotypes, but the images of Italian Americans are they're loud and animated. And were your fights? Were they?
Sometimes.
I don't know.
Sometimes.
Did you use Italian words when you
No.
There's a funny story about that, Joe. You can relate to this, Norma, and so can you. When my husband, who is not, you'll have a chance to meet him, when he's not Italian, and David's
I
a
know
wonderful,
that. With a
wonderful,
name like
wonderful guy.
David,
Yeah, but anyway, when we were in Italy, we separated ways. I went with women to get something, and he wanted to take a walk around the village and everything, and we were supposed to meet back because they gave us a villa to stay in of our own, and then we were going back to my cousin's. So he got there first, and he said, and when I was approaching him, and I was by myself because I had gone to change, and he's like, we can't go in there. There's this huge fight going on. He said I tried to knock on the door, but nobody heard me. They're screaming and they're yelling at each other, carrying on. He said I was afraid, and I said, well, we're just gonna knock on the door. It'll be fine. He said, are you kidding? I wouldn't do. So I knocked on the door. They come out. How are you? And they're like, he's got his arm around his wife, like nothing happened. You can relate to that, right, Norma? Isn't that what they do? It's like, it's out and then it's over.
And then it's over.
You know?
So it's would you say Italian American men and women, and Italians in general, they're not slow fuses, but they're
Tempered.
they're
They can
explosive,
explode,
but it's
yeah.
over with.
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
right.
Quick tempered.
Yeah, it's like a sparkler one. It just goes and then all of a sudden it's done.
Yeah.
Okay.
Today they would be saying they would need anger management as a whole culture. As a whole ethnic group.
That's so true. I know that when we meet at my son's house, and my son's wife's family comes, they really don't enjoy themselves. They actually told their daughter, they're too loud, they're too boisterous, they just are always hollering and laughing and screaming and carrying on, that we just don't fit in. And we're sorry that they don't fit in, because we really try to include them, but
Sure.
there's just something they pull back, and it's just, they're different. You know, they're nice people, but they said that they don't know how to take us, because we're always hollering,
Well,
yelling, laughing,
and we say,
screaming at
you
one
know,
another,
well, and I think that
and we
there's a
don't do it when
directness.
we're with other people. It's just
No,
like
just
within
with,
our
just
own.
with their own families. But there's a directness, don't you think,
It
too?
is a direct.
We tend to be very direct. I mean, women I know, Italian women and men.
It's a happy life.
Why do you sound disappointed that I'm not Italian? Am I a lesser man because I'm not Italian?
Oh, come
Now,
on,
Mary,
Joe.
come on.
No.
Look at these blue
Well,
eyes.
you could be Giuseppe.
Giuseppe?
Yeah.
Let's make you Giuseppe, yes.
We'll just name him
Look at these
Giuseppe.
beautiful girls.
Yeah,
these beautiful
right.
daughters.
Beautiful daughters.
No, you know what makes them, I would think is because of the way you spoke about your children. How you love your daughters. I can see, I saw it in him when we first
At the
came.
very beginning, I thought he was part Italian.
But that's part of, don't you think? Is that not true?
Even that
See,
much.
Norma's saying yes, it's a family, seeing what kind of a family man you are is also very
Well,
good to me.
when you have the greatest kids,
Yeah, what can you do?
yeah, I have no choice but be proud.
It's just-
I bet their mother had something to do with it.
Oh,
Lydia,
absolutely,
you sing?
absolutely.
What kind of music do you sing?
Different stuff, it depends.
Rock?
Not really.
Classical?
But, like,
She is a huge Frank Sinatra fan.
Can you sing something that Frank Sinatra
Good,
sings?
And
That's
she does
beautiful music.
she sings Bocelli songs.
my dad will sing, we sing a
No,
song
I'm not gonna
together.
sing it, but
Can you
Yeah.
sing a song for us?
No.
Entertain us this afternoon?
No, I can't.
No, we've embarrassed you, I'm sure, plenty for the whole day. Yes.